What if there was a better way to stay in control of all of your sales? That's what we're going to cover today on Sales is Easy. My name is Devon Gall. I'm your friend and mentor in marketing, business, and sales, and I'm the best that ever was at teaching this stuff. So let's get started. This is called staying on track. So when you're doing a presentation, even when you're doing the pitch, which is a presentation, anytime you're engaging with the customer, you want to stay within a narrow band of things you should be doing. So the four main components is building rapport, your talk track, your script, your ABCs, your always be closing, and gathering intel. All right. When you get really good at each one of these, you're going to be able to jump between each. We can go from 1 to 4 to 2 to 3 to 1 to 4. It doesn't matter, right? Because you know exactly what to say with each category. So I'm just going to give you some examples, but I'm going to explain how the presentation should look first. So every presentation, every interaction with the customer is really always the same thing. You're always going to have an opening and you're going to have a close, right? Then the goal is to get there as fast as possible and get them to close and sign up. Well, the way you do that is with a straight line, right? Ideally, that's the shortest distance, but it's never going to be a straight line, okay? It's going to be back and forth. It's going to be back and forth and back and forth. Your two main tracks, these are like the tracks for your train as you're pushing the train forward on the presentation, is your talk track, which is your script, and your closing, right? Keep closing meaning not sign here, but let's get to the next step. Listen to me for 30 more seconds. Or I'm building curiosity, I'm building impulse, I'm getting you to the next step. I'm getting you to the next step. That's what closing is. I'm getting you to the next step, right? So this is your main track to how to keep the line straight. But you're going to be a robot if you just do that, right? So you're not going to have enough information to actually close the deal. So you kind of got to go outside the boundaries a little bit and start building some rapport and asking some non-sales, non-system, non-service questions, right? To make a relationship, to make a friend, right? So you got to make a friend. And then you got to also gather intel, and you have to understand their needs. So you have to understand their needs. But when you start going off track, let's say you start building rapport, if you build too much, if you're just spending too much time on rapport, you're getting too personal, and you're losing control of the sale. If you're going and you're asking questions, but you go down into this range right here, right? You go in that range. Now you're getting too technical. AKA boring, right? You're trying to understand every little detail, and you need to focus on what the customer actually cares about. A good way to prevent yourself going out of the tracks is to build rapport and gather intel together. Ask questions, but then make it personal, right? Ask technical questions, but then kind of loop it back into making it more of a personalized question, right? So your idea is to go back and forth on the track until you get to the close here. So how do you build rapport? How do you make a friend, right? Smile, eye contact, enthusiasm. Use their name. Use name. Sweetest thing a person can ever hear is their own name. All right. Other things you can do is genuine compliments. Right? Don't make things up. Don't make things up. But you got to have genuine compliments. Find common ground. Talk baseball. Talking baseball, you've heard me use this term a lot, but it just means talking about something that isn't service or product related, right? So make a friend, use their name, use genuine compliments. Don't make up compliments just to have a compliment. They got to be genuine. They got to come from that place. People can feel the difference. Find your common ground. You can talk a little bit about something that's not sales related, something that's not system or service related, and build a relationship this way. Maybe you're both from the same area, whatever it is. find some common ground, and then talk about some things. Now, you don't want to do all these things at once, right? These are things that you're peppering in throughout your presentation, because you're going to use one of these things and then get back to the script. You're going to use one of these things and then get back to ABCs. Gathering intel now. Understanding their needs. You want to identify gaps. Identify hotspots. We also call gaps pain. Things that are lacking, things they wish they had, asking questions like, wouldn't it be nice if you could do this? These kind of things. Identifying hotspots. What do they like currently about their service and system? So then you can focus on matching and exceeding that with your service or system. All right. Using discovery questions. This is discovery. But again, you don't want to sit there and ask 20 questions in a row, because then you're going to get too technical, and that's boring, and no one wants to talk to you, right? So sprinkle these in, work these two together. You do this with this, it brings it closer to the middle, right? You're staying away from the guardrails. The guardrails are there to protect your presentation from flying off the rails, right? So talk track, this is, use the system. You got a system that works, use it, don't reinvent the wheel. If you don't have a system that works, get with the top guy in your office. Find somebody in your business, somebody that's in your niche. Find out their presentation. Do a discovery call with them. Find out what they're doing, how they're doing it to crush it, right? So use a system, right? I have a system. You can check it out in the link below. But you want to find a system that's proven, something that works. My systems work for 14 years. I know it works. I've taught hundreds of people how to use it. I have multiple success stories with it. But it doesn't have to be my system. It can be any system, but it has to be a system that works. And then you want to stick to it. Because if you're using this system or creating a new system or doing this thing or doing that thing with every customer, you're going to close some deals, but you're not going to have a very great closing percentage, because you're all over the place, right? So don't reinvent the wheel. When they start the thing is, when you go into building rapport, or maybe you gather intel sometimes, the customer will kind of take that and keep going, right? They'll start talking a lot about something. And this is where you need to bring it back. You're in control. You bring it back from those points yourself. And you bring it back ideally to the middle, to the talk track, to the ABCs. You're not going to cut them off and say, no, we can't talk about that. I'm going to close you instead. Just sit there, agree with them, acknowledge them, let them say their piece, but don't feed into it, because then you're going to go off into outer space and fly way off the guardrails, and then you're going to have this great conversation that goes nowhere. And you're not closing the deal, and they're going to say, "Wow, I really like you, but are you going to be here this weekend?" That's what's going to happen. So you got to stay in control here, and bring them back from outer space or off the rails. Right? That's your job as the presenter, is to bring them back to the line. ABCs, always be closing. Watch the movie, right? But use things like the ARC method. There's other ways to call it this, but acknowledge, relate, close, agree, relate, close. It's a loop. It's called the closing loop. There's I've heard probably 15 different ways to call it the closing loop. You got feel, felt, found. You got I completely understand. Those are the kind of things you want to use when you're closing people. You want to just acknowledge them, relate to them. Hey, other people I sign up, they ask me that same thing. You're going to want to memorize that phrase, because now you're putting them into a bucket of other people that have already signed up. You're asking smart questions. These are things you want to use and master here. You're focusing on value here. A lot of people get confused when they're closing. When they're closing, they think it's time for discounts. time to throw all the incentives out. The idea is to close the person at full price and give them zero incentives and zero any discounts, zero introductory offers, give them nothing, right? Even if everybody's qualified, give them nothing, close them on the value, how you're better, your product or service is better. Yeah, it costs more, but that's because it's better. Better things cost more, right? So you want to focus on selling on value. There's going to be a time you're going to get toward the end here, right? You're going to get toward the end, this area of your close. This is where you're going to start using discounts. You're going to start pushing them over the edge with some impulse, stuff like that. But you don't want to lead with discounts. You don't want to use discounts to sell your product. You want to use value to sell your product. So you want to really focus and hammer on that, right? Don't be an information booth. You want to build curiosity and impulse. All right, that goes into now we're closing, we're using discounts, we're using one discount at a time, we're using one special incentive, gift card, whatever, free months, whatever kind of deal you have going on. That's how you build impulse, but you're doing that later, right? You build curiosity and impulse early with value. Makes sense, right? Be the expert. Be the expert. But that also goes into don't be an information booth, right? Because you want to have when you truly are an expert on your product or service, you're going to know everything. You're going to know every little detail. And human nature is going to take over, and an inexperienced salesperson is going to sit there and want to share all the information they know. Because they learned everything. They went out of their way. They listened to everything I had to say. They studied on their own. They studied outside work hours. They mastered it. They became an expert. They learned every single detail of their product or service and every single detail of their competitor. Now they know everything. But also part of being the expert is being able to take out that big file cabinet of files with all those folders of information for each individual question and taking one thing out of the folder and use it to answer the customer's question. Don't take out the whole folder and just information dump the entire folder on them, right? You want to have just one, maybe two things, answer the question, and then get back to asking for the business. Get back to moving it forward toward closing the deal, right? Get back to identifying pain and hotspots. Get back to building a relationship. Because if you sit there and give them all the information, what happens is they get analysis paralysis, meaning they have too much info now and they need to digest it. They need to, quote unquote, think about it, right? This is where thinking about it usually comes from, because you're over sharing the information. You don't have to give that much information. You just answer the question directly. Don't evade the question, but just be the expert, answer the question. But being at the expert, like I said, it doesn't mean just knowing every single detail. It knows which detail to share and then how to get back to moving this thing forward. Makes sense? So, to review, talk track, closing, this is your main tracks. You want to build rapport and gather intel simultaneously. So you're kind of doing all these things all at the same time, all the entire time. You're kind of bouncing between these kind of things. It's not going to be like a little wave pattern. You're going to be here, 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 right? But you got to be able to seamlessly go between these things to keep the conversation moving forward. But remember, don't get too much rapport building, because you're going to get too personal, and then you're going to go way off track, and then they're going to say, "You're really great at sales. I'll see you this weekend." And don't go too much into gathering intel. Don't overdo it all at once, because you're going to get too technical and it's going to be boring and the customer's going to check out and they're not going to sign up. So stay on track, stay within the boundaries of the guardrails, and you're going to do great. Appreciate y'all, love y'all. Have a great rest of your weekend.